You know, when you think about books that have stood the test of time, few have had the staying power of The Art of War. I mean, it was written over 2,500 years ago by this kind of mysterious Chinese general, Sun Tzu, and this slim little book has become a total cornerstone of strategic thinking. And not just for war, but for business, leadership, diplomacy. You can even use it in your personal life.
But here's the really interesting thing about this brilliant work, the thing that makes it so much more than just a military manual. It gives us a blueprint for mastery by, well, completely flipping our definition of conflict on its head. It argues that real strategy isn't about jumping into bigger and bigger fights, it's about rising above them entirely.
You see, when Sun Tzu talks about war, he's not trying to glorify violence at all. He's actually treating conflict like a problem that needs to be solved with the least amount of force you can possibly use. To him, the actual clash of swords and shields, that's a failure of strategy. It's the last resort you turn to when all the other, smarter options are already off the table. And that's exactly why it's really a book of vision. Sun Tzu is inviting us to see conflict not as some battlefield of brute force, but as a landscape of choices, perceptions, and really subtle moves. He teaches that the absolute greatest victories are the ones you win without ever having to fight, and that true mastery, well, that comes from understanding, not from domination. Now, to really get a handle on this, we've got to go back in time. Sun Tzu is believed to have lived during the Eastern Zhou dynasty, right around the 5th century BCE. And this was a pretty wild time. China was fractured into all these warring states, and every single one was trying to get the upper hand. And right in the middle of all that chaos, Sun Tzu comes along as this voice of clarity, and he distills the absolute essence of military strategy into 13 chapters. And, even though a lot of his life is kind of shrouded in mystery, his legacy is absolutely undeniable. His teachings have influenced everyone from emperors to revolutionaries to modern strategists. I mean, from Napoleon all the way to the boardrooms of Wall Street and Silicon Valley, Sun Tzu's principles are still shaping how we think about power, competition, and leadership today. Okay, so how is all of this timeless wisdom actually structured? Well, the book's broken down into 13 chapters, and you can think of each one as a deep meditation on a different part of strategy, with each chapter building on the one before it. So each chapter is made up of these things called aphorisms. They're these short, really potent lines that just invite you to stop and reflect. For example, in laying plans, he tells you to compare 7 key factors before you even think about starting a fight. And then later, in use of spies, he lays out 5 different kinds of agents and exactly how to use them. See, these aren't just simple rules to follow. They're more like riddles to ponder, meant to guide your mind to a much higher level of strategic thinking. All right, so let's try to distill this all down. Across all 13 chapters, you start to see a few core themes pop up again and again. You can think of these as the philosophical pillars that hold up the entire book. And believe me, they're just as relevant today as they were 2,500 years ago. Let's start with what is probably the most famous of all his teachings, this foundational idea of knowing yourself and knowing your enemy. This one concept is really the heartbeat of his entire philosophy, and it leads right into one of his most powerful quotes. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. What he's saying here is that things like introspection, empathy, and just good old-fashioned intelligence are the absolute foundation of success. The crucial part here is that victory doesn't start with action. It starts with awareness. Building right on top of that, Sun Tzu introduces this idea of what he calls the highest victory, which, simply put, is winning without ever actually having to fight. He teaches that the best leaders, the best strategists, they resolve a conflict before it can even start, using tools like diplomacy, alliances, and psychological insight. Okay, next up, Sun Tzu introduces a tool that's a bit more controversial, but it's absolutely essential in his strategic playbook: the art of deception. Now, this isn't about lying for the sake of it, it's about controlling the entire narrative of the conflict. All warfare is based on deception. With this one line, Sun Tzu is basically championing the art of misdirection. So whether it's through feints, or false signals, or even psychological manipulation, he urges leaders to confuse and disorient their opponents, which basically means turning perception itself into a weapon. Sun Tzu also spends a lot of time warning against having fixed plans and rigid ways of doing things. He famously compares the ideal strategist to water, because water doesn't have a constant shape, right? It just flows around obstacles and takes the form of whatever container it's in. A leader has to be just like that, responding to changing conditions with agility and creativity. And finally, let's be honest, none of this works without real leadership. A commander, Sun Tzu argues, has to embody virtues like wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and discipline. It's a great reminder that leadership isn't just about tactics. It's about building character and having a vision that inspires true, unwavering loyalty. So, even though this book was born in the middle of ancient warfare, the art of war has found a ton of relevance in modern life, way beyond any battlefield. Let's just look at a few examples. We see its principles every single day in business strategy, right? Things like competitive analysis and market positioning. It's all over politics and diplomacy, guiding how coalitions are built and conflicts are resolved. You can even apply it to your own personal development, helping you navigate difficult conversations. And of course, in the world of technology, it's the foundation of agile thinking and strategic pivots. Seriously, in boardrooms, classrooms, and even on the sports field, Sun Tzu's principles are there, guiding anyone who wants to win with wisdom instead of just brute force. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? When you look at the art of war as a complete work, it's really less of a manual for starting fights and more of a mirror for the strategic mind. The art of war is not some glorification of violence, not at all. It's a guide to navigating life's inevitable conflicts with clarity, with compassion, and with control. It teaches us that real strength is found in restraint, that foresight is always more powerful than fury, and that the greatest victories are the ones won without any bloodshed at all. So that brings us to the big question you see on the screen. In a world that's so complex and changing so fast, how can ancient wisdom really guide us? Well, I think Sun Tzu's voice offers a pretty powerful answer. By staying calm, measured, and wise, especially when you're faced with chaos and change. His words are a reminder that strategy isn't about domination, it's about understanding, and that the art of war, when you practice it at its very highest level, actually becomes the art of peace.